of the trending topics, as you know, we've just been researching and trying to figure out what we want to talk about, has actually been the issue of gaslighting. You know, I've realized that a lot of people have a lot of questions about this. I think recently in culture, maybe in the past couple of years, it's become more apparent how often this happens. I don't think I had actually heard that word probably until about a year or two ago. Now, a lot of people use that word, sometimes in an appropriate situation and sometimes not. So, Josh, I just want to talk through this. I would love to hear your thoughts as a counselor on gaslighting. First of all, what is gaslighting? Can you just give us a general definition?
Yeah, so gaslighting is crazy making. And yeah, it's where it's a manipulative kind of technique or dynamic whereby I try to convince you that your perception of reality isn't valid, isn't legitimate, right? That what you saw, you didn't see, what you heard, you didn't hear, what you felt isn't the reality of the situation. That I look to try to convince you that your perception of reality isn't valid. Right? It's kind of the foundation of it, right? That's what gaslighting is. It's a reference to an old a scene in an old movie where the lights in the house would kind of dim. You know, that the man in the scene, you know, had a system in place that would dim the lights, and the woman would go, "What is going on?" And he'd pretend like everything was fine and that nothing had happened to make her believe that she was losing her mind and going crazy, right? So that's kind of what's the historical, you know, for the term gaslighting, but it's used to capture anytime a person is trying to distort someone's reality in a way to cause them to not be able to trust or not trust their own judgment or experiencing of things in life. And so it's a red flag of kind of manipulation, really.
Yeah, absolutely. My question would be, is this always intentional? Can people gaslight without even realizing that they're gaslighting someone?
Well, yeah, no, yeah, blah. Yes, it's always intentional, kind of by definition. That gaslighting is when somebody is trying to manipulate, right? So if they're gaslighting, they're calling into question. They may not use that term, knowledge, but it's a manipulative technique. It's something that's being done with the intent of trying to make the other person not to trust their own judgment, right? That I have an ulterior motive, right? That I'm lying and I don't want you to think I'm lying. And so when you come to me and say, "Hey, this doesn't seem true," and I go, "What are you talking about? Of course it's true." And I try to, you know, lay out all the different things that would not only convince you that it's true, but make you feel crazy for thinking that it's not true. And that I want you to feel crazy for not thinking that it's true, so that you'll believe me and you'll not question whether or not I'm telling the truth in the situation. And that if I'm really earnest and I'm you know, adamant about my story, then it'll cause you to go, "Well, did I really see what I saw? You know, is this really what happened?" Which is the intended end result of gaslighting, is to cause you to question your own judgment and perceptions.
Yeah, well, I think even, you know, questioning your own judgment and perception, but also kind of questioning your own identity. Like, you know,
Identity, your sanity. Totally. Are you crazy? Exactly. It's crazy making. Yeah. Like what is going on? Yeah. So definitely super manipulative kind of thing that happens. Doesn't, you know, it happens in romantic relationships, but it happens in other kinds of relationships also. And, you know, I think the one of the natural questions is, what do you do about it, right?
Right.
And then, so how do I know if this is happening in my world? And you've got to challenge that with reality. And you need somebody outside of your own head in order to help you calibrate to reality. And so these things, people who gaslight typically look to try to isolate the person that they're looking to gaslight with also, right? Because if there's another person in the room and the lights dim, and you're going, did the lights just dim?
Yeah.
And the gaslighting person is going, I don't know what you're talking about. Everything's just the way that it was. You're like, I could have swore it was brighter in here and the lights just dimmed. If there's somebody else going there, yeah, the lights just dimmed. You're not crazy. The lights are dimmer. That kind of like calls out the gaslighter, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Removes the power from the person gaslighting.
Exactly. So if I'm the gaslighter, I don't want anybody else in the room. I don't want anybody else to observe what's going on, because it kind of ruins my whole manipulation, right? It kind of ruins my ability to control and manipulate the situation if there's somebody else, observing reality, who can speak the truth about reality in the situation. And so the two really go together, kind of the gaslighting and the isolation of the person who's trying to be gaslit, as it were, if that's the right term, and that, right?
So I think that's the word I would use.
Yeah. So you want to notice, is in this relationship, has there been a tendency to try to cut off and discourage relationship with the people who care about me in my life, right? To put distance between me and maybe my family, distance between me and my close friends, distance between me and my small group at church, or trying to keep me from having or sharing. Because sometimes the distance there is about not sharing, right? And so for various reasons, we said, that these things are private. I don't talk about what's going on in your life, with other people. Why would you share what's going on between us outside? I feel so violated by you, breaking the confidence of our relationship, that sort of thing, which, all sounds good, logical, which is why it's crazy making them. But what it does is it isolates you from allowing the people who are in your life from actually seeing what's happening in your life in a way that allows that gaslighting to take place. So you really have to notice the isolating that's taking place and choose not to participate in that. Be like, no, healthy couples, healthy people have other intimate relationships, people who know what's really going on with them and their world, and allow others to speak into their life and be a part of the community of their life, and to be able to talk with others about what's happening. And oftentimes they'll find going, what? That's crazy. Right. Which can be tough. Sometimes we get to a certain point and we isolate because of shame, right? We're being shamed by the gaslighter for, wanting to share, wanting to connect, but then we can feel like, if I share this, people are going to think I'm crazy. They're going to think I'm crazy for going along with or staying in this so long. And that shame can be isolating. And all the shame just kind of keeps us stuck, which is right where the enemy wants us to be.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but would we kind of classify gaslighting as a form of emotional abuse?
Oh, totally. Yeah. It's like a common thing that emotionally abusive people use. It's in the toolbox. There's an emotional abuse toolbox, and that emotional abusers carry around gaslighting as kind of one of the go-to tools in an emotional abuse toolbox.
Totally. Well, it's such a, I don't want to say easy, but it is a very good way to manipulate someone and make them think that they are crazy, make them kind of the starting point of even just physical abuse and things like that, because then it's like anything that you do with me, anything you do to me, I'm going to view as not real or not important, or I'm crazy.
Yeah, and it's a frog in the water, boiling water kind of scenario, right? Like typically gaslighting isn't like really blatant and in your face when it starts coming into a relationship. Typically is really small and kind of incremental, and the isolation is small and incremental. But it gets to a place where it's just like nutso. But you've been in it so long, it's kind of feels normal at that juncture. Like you again are questioning your own reality. Like, is this just normal? Is it me? It must be me, because it's, been boiled alive kind of by the incremental shift in it.
Right. No, absolutely. I love hearing you just speak into that, Josh. I know that that's something I think a lot of people have struggled with. I believe that, I have experienced that in my own life. And sometimes we don't even realize it. I think sometimes, especially
Almost always, right?
almost always, yeah. And I
It
think
would be really weird. It's uncommon for folks to immediately notice kind of gaslighting taking place, because it only works in the context of an established relationship, right?
that's
If
exactly
somebody you don't know and you don't trust tries to
Mhm.
gaslight, you're like, what are you talking about? Get
Right.
out of here.
That's
No, I'm
exactly what I
better.
was going to say. When you're, in a close relationship, a romantic relationship, someone
Mm-hmm.
that you value, someone who you feel is supposed to value you, for example, a parent or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, it's very difficult, I think, to remove yourself from the situation and see it as it is.
Yeah, because the closeness of the relationship, the intimacy in the relationship, is the leverage for kind of making you think you're crazy,
Yeah.
right? And so if there's that leverage isn't there, then you're not going to trust somebody else's judgment over yours. Not, but when you bring in their relationship piece of it, we're like, well, maybe I'm maybe I'm not seeing this right, right? And begins to screw with your head.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that is really helpful just in helping us understand what that looks like and how to get help. Really, I think you touched on this. Not being isolated, I think is a very key
Mm-hmm.
part of getting out of situations like that, of
Totally.
recognizing and seeing the truth. So I appreciate that, and I hope that someone watching needed to hear this. I really do. The trending topics that we talk about, are thought of and prayed over, and hopefully that was able to really speak into someone's life who's
Mm-hmm.
watching this, and that you are seen and known and you're not crazy. And if you feel like this is happening to you, reach out to a friend, reach out to a counselor or someone you can talk to openly and honestly about this, because it's emotional abuse, and it
Mm-hmm.
does hurt, and it is a valid feeling to have when you feel afraid or shamed into believing something like that.
Yeah, counselors can be really helpful if you think you're in a relationship where there's gaslighting going on, and which is typically why the person gaslighting doesn't want you to see a counselor and doesn't want a counselor in your life or situation. Almost always, there's one of two things will happen. Either the counselor will, or the person will adamantly not want you to see a counselor engage, or they will want to kind of pick a counselor or go see the counselor first because they want to see if they can convince the counselor of their version of reality in a way, and then the counselor can be a ally to them in manipulating the situation. We see that oftentimes as therapists, where spouses will come in and a spouse kind of wants to convince the therapist of their version of reality so that the therapist can then be another leverage tool for them to manipulate their spouse with. But we're trained therapists. I mean, there are not so good therapists out there that can get caught up in that. But generally speaking, therapists are trained to catch that and see that, and they can see through the manipulation and what's going on in the situation. And therapist doesn't have a dog in the hunt, right? They're not your parent or mother. They don't have some vested interests of telling you what you want to hear. And they just are there observing reality as it sits in front of them and sharing what they're seeing, what they're experiencing in the situation. So it can be a really helpful way to have somebody who's familiar with all sorts of manipulation tactics and doesn't have a dog in the hunt and can look at the situation and kind of share the reality that they're seeing, which can be really helpful for beginning to break out of some of that manipulation that you might be caught up in.